Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of I Never Knew, Inc. for short, by Life Coach Maureen. So happy to have all of you here, and I welcome your feedback. Follow, share this with your friends. I have an absolute amazing guest today, and I was telling her off air how much this hits home for me. And when she reached out, I said, "Oh, I'm in 100%, 100 million%." So today with us is Avigail Gimpel, and that's a Abigail with a V as in Victor. I'm sure she has to explain that often. Abigail is a mom of six children, six wonderful children, and most are diagnosed with ADHD. She's been married for 24 years and counting. Wow, congratulations. I love that. She's also a special educator, a college lecturer, and an author of a book called Hyperhealing. And she also has a second book in progress that will be out in September, which I'm excited. So this is interesting too. She's a world traveler. She's a New Yorker who has lived in Moscow, Russia, and is now living in the outskirts of Jerusalem. It's funny where we land. I love
Right.
stories about where do we land. Oh my goodness, she teaches in three different languages from people from the ages of 6 to 65, and her focus has been on ADHD. So what happened with our lovely Abigail is I want to read a little thing from her author page on Amazon where you can find her book. She says, "I began my career as a special education teacher in an inclusion classroom with children of all ability levels, unique gifts, and challenges. She loves all her students, but the most intriguing were the students with special energy, the ones who were trying to drink from a waterfall instead of a glass, the ones who dreamed all day, but then said something that no one else thought of, the ones whose engines ran on instant gratification and had not developed habits and routines to focus their explosive energy. They were creative, funny, out of the box, and struggling." I get chills when I read that. So, welcome, Abigail. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I love your energy.
Thank you. I really do my homework because I like to see it's, we always say, this is what I do, but I want to know who you be. And that sounds really terrible language, but I really do. I really like to know what is the moment that we have in our lives that has this like profound impact that creates us to do the things that we do that become our purpose and really our passion. So tell me what really started you on this journey, and you can go back to childhood if you like. Did you feel different? You knew you were different. So let us know how this all started for you.
So my ADHD journey is a little bit strange because I only started reflecting back when I was a teacher, and I started teaching when I was 20, and I've been at it for like a lot of years. And so when I kind of met my first batch of students, and I was teaching mainly boys, and these kids were just all over the place. And but during recess, they came alive. They were amazing. They talked to me. They made circles around me and told me stories. And they would repeat the multiplication tables over and over again and say, "Did I do it right? Did I do it right?" And they were just so amazing during recess time. And then you try to haul them back into the classroom, and I just lost them. And I couldn't get them to sit and learn or sit, period. And I knew the kids were intelligent because I'd spent the time talking to them, and they were intriguing, they were curious. And I'm saying, how do I help these kids become active learners, because there's something that's getting in the way of them really starting to learn. And I was able to create a program for them back then. And it was something that really worked. I invited them to be at the center of the classroom because I realized when you read in that introduction that they're run on instant gratification. These were kids that wanted everything here and now, fun, interesting, dangerous, but they certainly did not want to do anything that was repetitive because that's terribly boring. So I had to make every lesson really relevant to them, put them right at the center, and create a structure that they felt safe in. But while I was working with my own students, I reflected back to myself as a teacher. And frankly, I have no idea what I was doing in the classroom. I hated school so much. It was like I'm begging, pleading, don't make me go today. And my kids try all sorts of tricks on me to make believe they're sick. And I'm like, guys, I did all of it. You have no chance. I see right through you. I was just really, really bad. And I think to myself, I don't have ADHD symptoms at all. Now, I sat and wrote a 400-page book and then another 200-page book that's not an ADHD kind of behavior. And to this day, I'm actually very organized and methodical with a lot of good habits. And but although my husband and all my children are not quite that way. And I'm thinking back and why was I such a bad student? And my students made me think. And I realized that when I was growing up, things were challenging in my home. My parents were splitting up. I was part of a big family. It was chaotic. There were a lot of challenges I, as a young kid, was facing. What was I going to find when I came home today? Was dad going to be home today or not? When was the day that we're going to be splitting up? My head was too full of my own voices and concerns to be able to learn. So what I realized was from my students and then reflecting back on my story, I realized that what we have to do is slow down and look at each child curiously and try to figure out what's getting in the way of their learning instead of saying, oh, that kid's got ADHD. So that's where I decided that was that space. We were missing a big, giant step. We went from observing symptoms to diagnosing, but we never took that journey of curiosity. And what were we doing? We were destroying children.
Wow. I love that. Do you hear that, listeners? That's impactful. We were destroying children. And when she says destroying children, I always think about how when I life coach clients, I have to undo a lot of stuff that was done. And that's exactly what you're talking about. So what's interesting to me is a lot of people, there's always stigmas around mental health issues, and especially with the ADHD. And I know I ran up against that with my own family when I said, hey, my son was diagnosed with ADHD and I myself was diagnosed with ADD. A lot of people will come back sort of that old school mentality, oh, you just don't know how to focus, or you just have a lot of energy. What's the difference in symptoms between, hey, I'm just need to practice a little more organization to get a little more focused, versus this neuro ADHD mind disconnect, which is what I like to say, those receptors? What's the difference? How do parents know what to look for in that? And how do they diagnose ADHD? How do they know if I'm just hyper, I have a lot of energy, and I'm yay, or I really have an issue?
ADHD is such a complex diagnosis for many reasons. And my aha moment came when I realized that what we're looking at in the DSM and the questionnaires that parents and teachers have to fill out is observable list of symptoms, which means that take, for example, and I was just teaching this morning because the summer semester just began. So I just gave this example this morning to my students, and but I think it's a good one. Um, Take, for example, your child's got a sore throat. So you take your child to the doctor. Actually, one of my students walked in and she looked terrible. And I said, what's going on? She says, I've got strep. I said, oh, you did a strep test and it came up positive? She says, no, the doctor looked in my throat and said I have strep and now I'm on antibiotics. And I said, well, I wouldn't trust that doctor. That's not a reliable doctor, because you can look in a throat and it could be 10 different things. It could be a really sore throat because I haven't been sleeping very often. And it could be that I have strep, and it could be viral, and it could be COVID, and it could be 10 other different things. It could be CMV, like a mono. And they would all kind of look nasty down there, but some of them are viruses and some are bacterial. And antibiotics that the doctor very not smartly handed to this person might not be the treatment of choice. And she would just be killing her gut microbes because the doctor wanted to get her out of the office quickly. So the same thing is happening with the ADHD. Really, what we're seeing is observable symptoms. and the child is having trouble sitting, and the child's having trouble communicating in class, getting things done, following through, all the symptoms that we see. But there are so many different causes of ADHD symptoms that people just don't think about, because we go directly to the neurological. There's something wrong with the synapses and the neurons and the neural pathways. And that might not necessarily be the story. And in many cases, it's not the story, because we go from a personality that we inherit from our parents, that we were just talking about, instant gratification personality. And we also have trauma, stress, anxiety, and abuse that cause ADHD symptoms. That is decidedly not neurologically caused, because that's an environmental cause. So many times we're having a healthy child responding in a healthy way to an unhealthy environment. We also have screen addiction itself, and sleep problems, and lack of exposure to nature. And also, one of the major causes of ADHD symptoms is a gut dysbiosis. So the diagnosis is a complete mess, because doctors do not take this journey. They don't look at all of the different causes of ADHD. And just to go back to your question, how does a parent know?
Mm-hmm.
The only thing a parent could really know is that their child is exhibiting symptoms that are holding them back from flourishing. At that point, the natural conclusion is not going to be, oh, and therefore my child has ADHD. The natural conclusion must be, what's going on? Why is my child struggling? Could it be that there's bullying in school? Could it be that the child has gut dysbiosis? I don't know. Does he have asthma, allergies? Does he have skin rashes? Does he have maybe a runny nose constantly? We have to look at everything in order to get a sense of what's really going on, and give that child the full respect the child deserves.
Wow, I so love that. It's the when I say holistic, it's a holistic approach.
It
Whole
is.
meaning WHOLE,
Yes.
whole person, and I love that. I'm all about let's look at all of the factors. And a lot of us, like my son, he was immediately thrown on stimulants. You know,
Right. A couple of
he
my kids too, by the way.
yeah, put on that Adderall right away, put on that Vyvanse. He was a little guy and he lost weight. And so there's so many of these side effects. In your book, you do a lot of the nutritional help, and that's twofold as well, because I don't know about your children or any experiences that I've heard, but I know with my son, he was a very sensory picky child. So
Mhm.
he ate really weird things. He liked really weird things that most kids don't like, and then other things, that you think he would like. He didn't like hamburgers and French fries, like from McDonald's. I have a funny, quick story, not to digress, but in order to get my son to eat meat, any kind of meat, we had to tell him it was chicken, and we did this, and this is terrible. He every I would make pork, I would make whatever, and he'd say, "What is it?" Because he knew he liked chicken. And so I'd say, "Well, it's just chicken." And so he was like 12 or 13 years old, and we had made this prime rib, beautiful prime rib for a holiday, and he's taking pictures. And he posted it on social media, and he said, "Look at our chicken for Christmas." And I was like, "Oh, I guess it's time to like tell
You
him
might want to clue them in.
that he likes other things." So, what about that part of it, the sensory part of it with the ADHD? And it will throw in a little bit of the autistic as well, where
Right.
sensory textures and stuff are very important.
Yeah, so sensory is a big thing with ADHD. It's not, one doesn't cause the other, it's those comorbids. But what I've found is that a lot of kids with gut issues also have sensory issues, because a lot of our sensory stability markers are really coming from the center of our body, from our gut. And once we get the gut in order, then we reduce a lot of the sensory issues. So and what you said is correct. If the kid already has a sensory issue, meaning the kid is a really picky eater, then you have trouble getting past that. And I learned something very interesting. I also had one very, very picky eater, and he ate the same meal every day or junk. Like there was nothing else. He was a complete vegetarian, until about 13 or 14 years old. And then he went into high school, and the guys would go out for hamburgers, and he kind of like, it was embarrassing not to eat with them. So he forced himself to start eating. But I got, and now he's in the military. Actually, he's a combat soldier. He's a big guy. Somehow with all the picky eating, he landed up being like a big refrigerator. So everything worked out well. But I got some advice. Actually, it was from a podcast. So I guess these podcasts are amazing. Good for you. So the woman was talking about, she was a health coach, and she said that these kids who are sensory, with their taste, with their mouth, when you try to tell them to put something in their mouth, they see it as like dog food. They
Yeah.
don't see it as human food, which means that we say, I love this cucumber. This is delicious. It's crunchy. Take a try at it. You're going to love it. What you're saying is, eat this dog food. It's going to be great for you. And we're so disconnected because we wouldn't eat dog food. But so what she recommended, and I wish I remembered her name so I give her credit, but what she recommended was that you take 2 weeks and you explain to your child, again, very respectfully, you say, this doesn't look like food to you. It feels like dog food to you. It's disgusting for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a challenge where you eat a little bit of it every day. Don't even think if you like it or not. Just put it in your mouth, chew it, and swallow it. After 2 weeks, I'm going to ask you on 2 week and 1 day if you like it. If you like it, we add it to your diet, because now your brain is signaled that it's regular food, and we can add that. You did that kind of covertly with your son with the meat. You
Yeah.
snuck it in. His brain thought chicken's not dog food, meat is dog food, and therefore he was able to eat it. But I very much like to have the conversation with the kid, and it's really worked beautifully over and over again. I've passed on this advice many times, and kids really respond well to it, because you're not telling them, you are so dumb that you can't figure out that this is good food. You're saying, your brain has decided this is not food, and we need to just reprogram gently and lovingly.
Yeah, definitely. I think I love the individualism that you talk about, because they are all so different and there are some similarities. So they're wired differently, and I know that my own son was super visual, just absolutely visual. And they had these tests in school, these reading thing. You have to read a certain amount of books. And before I had gotten his 504, I remember he had the hardest time reading fiction.
Mm,
And he was reading encyclopedias on sharks when he was 3. And
I
so,
love
how do parents of children with ADHD work with the school system besides the 504, which is super important in the IEP, sorry, which I think is super important. And I know we're definitely going to touch on that. But how do we work with the school if we don't have that yet, trying to get that diagnosis and trying to get them to understand, this is how my child learns, because I know my child better than anyone. And my son was able to, they allowed him to read nonfiction books and get credit for it. So, which is
Fantastic. So I think that all of us moms and dads, all of us parents, we have to really get Mama Bear down pat, because we are our children's only advocates. And the way the public schools are taking over control of raising our children is horrific. And we should not be standing for it at any point. And if my child is a nonfiction reader and loves sharks, I'm going to introduce my child at the beginning of the year, and I'm going to say, teacher, this is my amazing kid, and this is what he loves to do. So let's take it and make that part of the curriculum. And I'm not going to stand for no, because this is my child, and my child has to have a good experience. I have a son who struggles with dyslexia, but he's brilliant with his hands. He's artistic with his hand. He can make anything out of metal, wood, you name it. He could create it. He's outside. I kind of blew my car today by mistake, and he's outside fixing it. God bless him. And he has everything memorized. It's just remarkable. And when he was sitting in school, I knew that he was learning everything. but reading and writing was a nightmare for him. So I said to the teacher, this is my incredible child. And what he's going to do, with your permission and us working together, obviously with a lot of respect to the teacher, is he's going to create diagrams, he's going to create 3D projects, and that's going to be his project. He's not going to write book reports because he can't, but he can represent the book properly, and he can tell his friends all about it with his amazing 3D wooden creation, whatever it is he's doing. And he won all these, contests. When it came to building, every child's got to shine where they shine. And we have this kind of cookie cutter setup. And the only way to take my child out of that is by being that advocate and very strong and very loving toward my child.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think anyone who it has an ADHD child or is ADHD or AD, there's these special gifts. They have a way of expressing themselves. And because it's out of the norm and people don't understand that, we forget to acknowledge that. And I love that you said, this is my amazing child. And look at how artistic he is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of frustrating, isn't it? As parents, sometimes you go into that classroom and the teacher always sees the straight A kids, the ones that are focused, the ones that are doing a great job, and you feel like you have to go in there and convince them,
Right.
how great your kid is. It almost puts this sort of weight on our kids, like, okay, I have to prove myself, and that's
Right.
the
We're
stuff
like
that,
selling our child to the teacher. And it's
right?
so crazy because the child's such a
Yes.
gift.
And doesn't that carry on through life where they're like, I always felt I have to prove myself? One of the things my son said, and I want to ask you, I, there's the medical practice. I was in the medical field for 28 years, and then I started into the mental health arena. And one of the things I noticed, because all of my children had some sort of mental health struggles, I noticed that sometimes when we get a diagnosis, we almost get an excuse. And it almost inserts that, oh, well, I'm ADHD. I don't have to focus. And my son, I countered and said, because they say you have this thing, honey, that's not a crutch. That just means you are extra special and just have to work extra, hard to show them how amazing you are. What do you think about the labeling part of diagnosing?
I think you hit on a huge issue because we have raised a generation of victims, and it's done them only harm. And we giving out tons of labels, and the person who's the most sorry, the most labeled, the most the bottom of the pile, according to our understanding of things, our pecking order. And I don't know where we got that from to begin with. And we're all equal, in the eyes of God, and somehow in this generation we have this hierarchy of insanity. And the more we feed into it, the more we weaken our children. And I tell my children, just like you do, that this child was born exactly the way he or she was supposed to be, with the gifts and the challenges that he or she was supposed to go through. And I'll say to my daughter, on the one hand, you have a hard time focusing for a long time. On the other hand, you're so artistic. You pick up a paintbrush and you're creating something out of nothing that's miraculous. So everyone, there's no excuses. It's not a matter of ignoring the challenge. It's a matter of saying every single person has a challenge. So that kid who's a straight A student might be shy and might be a little timid and have a little bit of fear speaking to adults, or might not be quite as curious as you, and therefore is not absorbing and learning from the environment as you are. So she's a fantastic student and good for her, but she needs help somewhere else. And we have to not feel sorry for ourselves. We have to always be saying, I'm making a choice. And I repeat that sentence to my children because I don't want this victim mentality seeping into my home. It's like I'm guarding the doors from that, because there's nothing more destructive, and the entire generation's been infected by it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to put us on pause for one moment because we are on Zoom. It doesn't give me as long as normal. So hold on one moment and we're going to continue this in just 1 second. So, Abigail, here's a really interesting question, and I think a lot of parents are going to wonder this though, because we always have mommy guilt for everything. It doesn't matter what happens,
Everything.
right? It doesn't matter what happens to our kids. It's my fault. So, I've heard things. I want to know the truth behind any science, whether it's nurture versus nature, of what causes ADHD. Have they found a scientific reason, chemically wise, that this happens?
That's so funny because this morning when I was speaking to my class, I said to them, okay, tell me what causes ADHD. And every single one of the women whereas like, it's the mother smoking. It's the mother this. I'm like, stop it. We're awesome creations. We're great. It's not our fault. So there,
I'm not
there
alone.
is, I don't know what's wrong with us. Uh, anyway, like really, like we are the foundation of the world. Without us moms, nothing would happen. So we
Right.
have to be nicer to ourselves. Anyway, there's a nature component and a nurture component. The nature component would be the instant gratification personality, because that is a healthy personality that you inherit from your parents, your grandparents, aunts, uncles. I have a daughter who's very similar in nature to one of my sisters, which is so cute for me to be raising my sister. But the instant gratification personality is considered a normative personality. But this child is the one who wants everything here and now and fast and fun, like we were saying, and therefore that person is not creating proper habits, because we need to repeat things in order to create habits. So habits would be their enemy. And they'll be very excited about something for about 2 minutes, and then whoop, that completely drops off when they have to start putting work into it and planning it and getting into the nitty gritty little details. That's when we lose them. Or like think about showering. They're really excited. They're in a video game. They're really doing great, and then you're like, okay, shut it off and go take a shower. You know how many steps of non-gratification are in that one sentence? And then you're like, what's the child's problem? Well, he's wired to be wanting to enjoy himself right now, and you just pulled him away from that. And then you try to, so you get him away from his book, finally into a shower. You're both crying at that point, and then he turns on the shower and he's singing his heart out. And you're like, oh my God, was that worth it? Because now he's enjoying himself again. And he's running out the hot water for the neighborhood. You said your neighborhood's pretty hot right now, so you'll probably not run. Here in Israel, we run out of hot water, believe it or not. As an American, that was hard for me to adjust to. So that's the nature part, is that personality that we inherit. And personalities, we don't change, we enhance them. And we as parents, we walk beside each child with their separate personalities. I joke with my kids that I have 6 PhDs because each one of them is so different. I'm like, could any of you have repeated a personality that I already like mastered? No, they all had to come as separate human beings, and
You
they're all
wanted you
strong.
wanted this wide spectrum of experience. So
I
there you
clearly
go.
did. I didn't realize I wanted that, but that's what the universe was inviting on for me. So that's what I got, and I'm very blessed by that.
Yes.
But then there's the nurture part. There's the nurture part where children are being exposed to too much screens, and the nurture part being the unfortunate situation of children dealing with trauma or abuse or bullying. So those are things where you have a healthy child that's now going to behave with these symptoms, not based on something that they were born with, but rather the environment is pushing them over the edge, or children living in a war zone. So I know that everyone thinks Israel is a war zone. It's not. It's a peaceful, beautiful country where we can travel around wherever we want. And we have, actually, I have right here next to me a beautiful little pink dress that I just bought for my friend who's a Palestinian man who just had his fourth daughter. And I'm trying to comfort him on having his fourth daughter, because in that society, that's
Yeah.
not a very good thing to have. But so I keep buying him gifts anytime I see something cute.
A
It's okay.
consolidate
It's
a
affordable.
consolidation gift. I mean that's just culturally sometimes that's how it is. So and it's
Right.
sweet that
Yeah,
you're
right.
like, yeah,
Exactly.
whatever I
So,
can do.
so the point is that there is that part of Israel, but there are areas that definitely are closer to a border where they're getting more missiles, shot their way. And in those areas, you have way more kids with it, problems with ADHD issues, with bedwetting issues, with anxiety. And that's, once again, that's nurture. There's nothing that child did not show up that way. So, and not only that, if you look at it, you cannot have a genetic epidemic. It's impossible, because anything that's an epidemic, that's anything that's genetic, moves very, very slowly.
Mm.
And but now we have an epidemic of ADHD. Most of that is going to be nurture. Most of that is the environment that we've put our children into. They're more fearful today. They're more fragile today than they used to be. They take less chances, and they have more screens. They have, their lives are more distracted than they used to be. And therefore, that epidemic part of it. So let's say we had 2 to 3% of kids ADHD in past generations. Today in American public schools, about 18% of boys are diagnosed with ADHD. That's an epidemic, and that is our environment.
Wow, that is it. That's really, you just completely flipped my script. Because I'd always heard genetic, 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 and then you always say, "Oh, your uncle was this, your dad was this." So,
Right.
guys, it's there's hope right there. It's nurturing. We can fix that. We can
You
change
sure
that.
can.
We can absolutely nurture these kids and change the way they view themselves, and therefore, giving them that early on in childhood excuse me, discipline. I'm going to be honest with you, and I think the other parents of ADHD kids, and you're gonna completely, I think, be on board, because they are a lot of work and energy. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but my son was a lot of took a
Mhm.
lot of my energy. I did resort to a lot of bribing. Is that pretty common?
That that is the most common.
Okay. I'm not
Just behave
alone.
yourself. Have a candy.
Oh, literally, which if you just go brush your teeth, then you can go ahead and have 30 more minutes on your game. But then the 30 minutes comes, and then you're like, you need to go to bed. And my kid had to watch TV all night long. He had to have stimulating stuff or he wouldn't go to
Instant
sleep.
gratification.
Ah, so how do we deal with that? Because especially in my case, I was divorced from his father when he was 10 months old.
Oh,
So
wow.
trying to do this with two other children, and there was 9 years between my oldest and him, it was like having an only child. And I'm a single parent, just exhausted, working graveyard shifts. It we didn't really figure anything out. It just as we went along. But he would go to weekends with his dad, and he wouldn't take his dad wouldn't give him the medicine. His dad would say, "You don't have this. There's nothing wrong with you." And he was a physical discipliner, where I never, ever spanked my children. I felt talking to them. So we were on complete opposite sides. He'd come home from the weekend and he was off the charts. And
Yeah.
I so how do you help parents that are trying to co-parent if you have one co-parent that isn't on board with a diagnosis?
There are certain things that we can't necessarily fix,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot we can do even on our own. And
Okay.
I know my husband was traveling a lot when my kids were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't like a contra. It wasn't like he was against what I was doing, but often I was the parent in the house.
Yeah.
And then he would come back and I'd have to let him know what program we were on right now. And he kind of tried to join me in his own way. But what I had to do raising my children, my instant gratification or special energy children, however you'd want to call it, is I created this program for them, for my clients, for my students, and that's what I outline in the book, because of after 15 years of using this program, perfecting it, I felt like I had to pass that on to other parents, because no parent should be left alone with this problem, because these kids exhaust us. My mother-in-law said to me that when she went to a parent teacher meeting for my husband, he's from Georgia. And so the teacher said to her, she says, Mrs. Gimpel, I give 50% of my attention to your son, Danny, and the rest of the attention I have to sprinkle amongst the other 25 kids. So they suck our attention. And that's because they're instant gratification children. And that's because they need our feedback. So they are not going to let us go until we give them strong feedback. And therefore, the first part of the program is looking at the mirror at ourselves. What kind of feedback am I giving my child? Am I yelling a lot? Am I punishing, either physically or sending a kid to a room? Or am I focusing on the negative very often? Because this child needs my attention. Yeah. And therefore, whatever I'm dishing out, he's going to order 10 more up. So if I explode on him, I'm going to explode 10 more times. So it's a nasty cycle, and I'm letting this child lead, which is kind of scary because he's immature and irresponsible and doesn't know how to lead quite yet. So therefore, the first step is me. How can I bring down my negative energy? And very often, speaking about moms and blaming ourselves, we look at the child and we say, what have I done? What have I created here? This kid's a mess. And, or we worry, what's going to be with this child's future? Is she ever going to grow up to be a responsible human being? My daughter just today bought herself a pet rat. So I'm asking myself that just today. She's so happy. She's been wanting to do this since she's like 5. So now she has her own money and a driver's license. So she just went over to the store and just got the rat. And no one can eat in the house because we're all nauseous, but I'm sure it's going to be a lovely pet. Anyhow, so you're looking and you're like, is this child ever going to be normal? Is it going to make any friends? And so when we get frustrated with our child, we have this like suitcase of anxiety and past voices, especially if you're a mom who has ADHD or ADD yourself. You've heard all that stuff. You're lazy. You're not working your hardest. Why do you always lose things? And when we repeat them to our child, we repeat them with even more emotion than and is possibly necessary. So we have to first scale back ourselves and learn how to give our child a tremendous amount of positive feedback. What's remarkable about this is that when we get it right, our entire environment turns around. So I say it's a miracle and a lot of hard work. So we have to really do that within 2 weeks of getting this right, of giving the right compliments. And I really walk parents through this because we have to do this. We can't skip this step. Right. Then they call me 2 weeks later and they say, oh my God, I didn't know I had such a great kid. So that's step number 1. And then we move on to the helping, first of all, the discipline. We all discipline poorly, myself included. So I worked on I found a discipline program that works great for kids with instant gratification personalities, which was developed by Alan Kasdan. And I recommend that I talk about it in the book. I really outline what he recommends. You can go to the source as well. And so that's a great program specifically for these kids. But in terms of it, you began with the question about bribing. So I do give prizes. But the prizes are very directed at building habits, because that's the main issue these children are missing. So I'll have, let's say, a morning routine. So we'll do it over and over again. But since they're instant gratification, if there's nothing fun happening today, they don't want to get out of bed, because instant gratification is staying in bed this morning. Thank you very much. So, and instant gratification, doesn't matter that mom's yelling at me. It's much more fun for me to stay on my screen and ignore her and like watch her explode, implode, and lose her mind. But I'm having a great time here. So therefore we have to shift it to external rewards, which work, but very, very directed, so that the children develop over a month, they develop a new habit, and that's theirs to keep. So yeah, let's use prizes, but let's be smart about it. And we'll see how our children really grow up and develop these great habits.
I love that. I love that. And one thing that I had learned with my son, because he's going to be 24 in a couple months, is listen to your child tell you how he needs to be parented. And that was a hard thing because we always think I'm the boss here and I know what, I'm the boss applesauce and what I say goes. My son, and I'm going to say this for those parents, when your child becomes a teenager, they're already rebellious. And then you add in an ADHD rebellion, and we had a hard time. And my son sort of stopped me in my tracks at one point, and he said to me, "Mom, if you'll talk to me or ask me with respect, then I'll give you respect." And I had to stop, like you said, your first step, positive feedback. I had to stop and take a look and go, am I always demanding? And I did. I was. And it changed. But I'm going to tell you, we had these hard days, and you're going to laugh at this story. Um, I was in my robe and I was tired, and I had to get him whatever, his breakfast, and I'm making lunch, I'm buttering the toast, and he just woke up. Mornings were always the hardest. I don't know why, but mornings were rough getting him up, asking him 100 times to get up. And this was at about, I think, 13 or 14. So at that really middle school age where they're just little stinkers for a moment. And maybe hormones and puberty have a play in that as well.
And they're starting to become taller than you, like
Yes.
disciplining them, and you're like, stop doing that. And
That was it. I couldn't do anything, and he knew I couldn't do anything. So I'm buttering my toast in my robe, and he's screaming at me. And I said, I'm not going to deal with this morning. You need to just take care of what you need to take care of and get yourself to the bus stop. And he always knew how to push my buttons, and they do. They're smart. And one of the things he would do is slam the door, and we have gravel outside, and he would like kick the gravel on his way just because he knew it would upset me. Well, that morning, it just must have been the over the top moment where he did that. And I found myself running after him with the butter knife in my robe, going,
wow.
going, I told you not to slam the door. And we laugh about it to this day. It wasn't really a run, it was more like a brisk walk. And he's just like walking really fast, like looking behind me. And he's like, you look crazy. And we laughed so hard. It was just maybe a breaking point. So, teenage wise, tell us, I decided to give him choices. And they were choices that I needed him to make both of the choices, but in a different way where he felt he had some power. Is that a good method that you suggest?
Yeah, oh, excellent. They must have choices. And they also, just like that message you gave him when he was younger, they need to be empowered. They need to know that they can make decisions, and they must make decisions. Our teenagers know that there's nothing we could do to stop them from doing anything. They know as well as we do.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have to have an environment that they want to be in. They want to talk to us. And whereas we're not our children's friend, and that's another mistake our generation made, besides for bubble wrapping our children, we also brought ourselves down to their level, and our poor kids just wanted like guidance and parenting. And so we try not to do that. And my kids, I was actually at an event with my youngest daughter. It was like a mother-daughter event, and this actress was doing some kind of like a very fun game with us, and she was inviting up the daughters, and she would say to the daughters, "Isn't your mom your best friend?" And the girl would be like, "Yeah, my mom's my best friend." And my daughter's like getting uncomfortable in her seat, and she looks over at me. She says, "They're not supposed to be best friends." That's wrong. So we don't do that, but we have to be prepared to be very honest and share ourselves with our children. My kids will know whatever question they ask of me, no matter the topic, no matter that I have to like reveal my bad stuff of my childhood. I'm going to share it with them, and we can sit for hours. So I give them an environment where they want to hang out with me. They want to talk to me. And when my son comes back from the army and it's his turn to walk the dog, he says, "Hey, mom, want to come out with me? Let's walk the dog together." And we have a sweet little walk in the evening with each other. And that's really where it is, giving them that emotional nurturing. Whereas when they're younger, we're doing a lot more discipline that expires at some age.
Oh,
And
I
then it's just
agree.
about receiving and being present and being interested in them. And they're all interested in different things. And one of my daughters, she loves makeup. And I try very hard not to, like, zone out when she's talking about makeup, but that's her passion. And I'm like, great, let's talk, let's order together. Let's do this. This will be fantastic. But I think that's the key for teenagers. One thing, I actually got a great piece of advice from a very experienced parent. He said to me, you should make sure that your home is a place where your kids want to bring their friends, because you want to know who your teenagers' friends are. And they do. The kids hang out here and the friends feel comfortable here. And I'm not the friend's buddy either, but they could come in, how you doing, pull the refrigerator open, and this is a landing spot for the kids, and that's really important for them.
Oh, I agree 100%. My house was that house. Everyone was here. Even their teenage friends. My kids would say, "Oh, you have a problem? Go talk to my mom. She'll help you." This is before I was ever a life coach, so I actually was a life coach my entire life. Just wasn't getting paid for it. But I think you're right, and I always say this to my clients that are having struggles in their parenting in general, whether it's ADHD or children with anxiety or depression, is the more you act like that you the more you think you're a perfectionist or you behave as everything has to be perfect, the more you're going to get it wrong, because in parenting you're never going to get it right. You're always going to
Right.
change. It's going to change. Their energy is going to change, your energy is going to change. You're going to figure each other out. Every child's different, like you said. And the biggest thing is, there's two things your children want from you: love and time. If there's anything else outside of that, guys, don't worry about it. If you're giving them love and time, you guys are gonna all figure it out. And
Amen.
I
Great
cannot
advice.
wait for everyone to get your book, and then your second book coming out. What's the name of the second book as well?
So the second book is called Hyperhealing, Show Me the Science. And that's the journey through understanding what on earth ADHD is, understanding diagnosis, the medications. I want everybody to have 100% informed consent, because a lot of us will decide to medicate our children, and I did it myself for a period of time, and now we're medication free for many years. But I did not have informed consent. I did not know the studies on the long and the short term, on the potential risks and the potential benefits. I didn't know anything except that the doctor, who was the grand authority, was handing me a prescription. And I think that we've given over way too much authority and power to the powers that be, whether it be the government, the school system, or the doctors. And we need to take that back. So that's why. So that this second book, which was really my first deep dive into really investigating, understanding ADHD, was really my first love. I really needed to understand that and read, comb through millions of studies to really get to the truth. But the first book, the Hyper Healing, is for a parent who might not be curious about the science and the history and all that stuff, because not everyone is. That's fine.
Yeah.
The first book is really a handbook. It's a course that I actually recommend that parents learn together. Create a support system. I call it a support and information group, where you go through chapter by chapter. You open a WhatsApp group. There's an action plan at the end of every chapter.
Wow.
And there's also, I actually include the cheat sheet, which is how I got through high school. So I want to hand that forward, the Cliff Notes. So each chapter has Cliff Notes on it as well. And therefore, a group of parents who are all struggling with the same issues can get together and go through chapter by chapter and really build each other up and support each other. That was my big dream, my intent when I wrote the book the way I did.
Oh, that I love the fact that someone has a handbook for parents now. I mean, like I said, where were you 20 years ago for me? But especially having that support, you feel so alone. You feel there's this
Yeah.
shame and guilt, like I said, of nobody else gets it. But to have a support group, and guys, that book, her hyper healing book, is literally giving you that step by step. When you feel lost and you don't know what to do, you go to her book and it's going to walk you right through it. And the second book is doing all the scientific research for you so you don't have to do that. And I think I love that you're doing both sides of it. We've got the logic, and then we've also got the support and the help and the steps to take. So tell us, this is for the next few minutes, tell us what's going on, how to find you, where to find your book. And then I have one last question that I ask all of my guests that's really fun, and I can't wait to see your answers. So
Okay.
tell us your websites, tell us what you have coming up, how do we find you, and how do we get involved and get to really, really know Hyperhealing and Abigail Gimpel.
Well, thank you so much. My website is hyperhealing.org. And actually, right now, you could download the first chapter and all the cheat sheets for free when you subscribe. So that's available. I really would like to get that information out there. And the book is available on Amazon, both in an ebook as well as the regular softcover book. And I'm working on getting the audio out there. So hopefully by September, October, it'll be ready to roll. I'm on Instagram. You could definitely find me on Instagram, hyperhealing at hyperhealing.adhd. And you can send me messages through both of those. I respond to all the messages I get, and I'm always happy to hear your ideas, your story, your questions. That's really enjoyable. I'm a teacher, so I love the interaction. And really, my goal and dream is to help parents never ever have to be alone again. So if I could be in your corner, then I would like to be.
Excuse me. I love it. She's a teacher light worker. She's right here. She's in her purpose. This is what she's passionate about. You can tell when people are passionate about what they do. They just smile and they light up. And obviously, you guys, when you see this video, Abigail is super passionate about it. So as we close, I have a fun little question that all of my guests have to answer. And it is, what is your shameless, self-indulgent thing that you do for yourself, or eat or go or whatever? What's your shameless self-indulgence?
That's funny because I actually discovered it during COVID. I
Oh.
love to read, but I didn't realize how much I love to read until all of my 6 kids and my husband were locked in a house together for 3 months. And I was like just so overwhelmed. Like there was not a moment of quiet. In order, I actually finished my first book during the first lockdown. I'd have to wake up at 5 in the morning and write for 2 hours before the first person woke up hungry. It was a good time, actually. I opened my YouTube channel during that as a family project to entertain my kids. So actually, I'm on YouTube at Hyperhealing Mom. So you can find me, and you'll know that I made most of those videos during the COVID lockdown. But what I discovered is that suddenly I was taking these really, really long baths. I was like escaping into my bathroom, taking these really long baths. I'm like quickly finishing a book before somebody spoke to me. So I guess that would be it. My husband always describes this is your ideal vacation. You're sitting on a hammock under a palm tree at the beach with a book, and I'm serving you a nice drink. He's like,
Sounds
I don't actually
good.
have to be there. I just have to bring you the drink. I said, no, that's not true, but that actually does sound kind of nice.
I love that. That's a great, I mean, that's just like a great self care thing to do anyway. And moms need a break. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I should do it
especially
more often.
you should do it more
Yes.
often. It needs to be a part of your daily get up and do whatever you do. I always tell everyone, do some nature, do some self-care, do some good food, do some good music, do physical activity. Those five things at least get your day started for you, and then you can be the best for your family and your friends and your job and your business. So well,
Absolutely.
you've been an absolute joy. So YouTube Hyper Healing Mom, guys, go find her. Instagram at Hyper Healing ADHD. Is that was correct? And
Yeah.
then hyperhealing.org is
Yeah, that's the website.
perfect. I got it. See, I was trying to write without even looking. So
You did
I
great.
take a lot of notes and try not to look like I'm taking some notes because I like to come back. But
Listen, I'm a teacher. I notice every move you make.
Oh gosh, did you see my little coughing fit then? Thank you, Abigail. What a pleasure. What a pleasure. I always think we cross paths with one another for a reason. And I definitely, when I saw you and what you were about, I knew you were meant to be on my path today. And I think all of our listeners are definitely going to appreciate all of this information. Again, guys, go find Abigail. I am at lifecoachmaureen.com, my website. You'll see all the other podcast episodes as well as my blog, my books. And I am on Life Coach Maureen on Facebook as well. I have two books as well. My dog is more enlightened than I am, and my dog is my relationship coach, which teaches us how to learn to love ourselves and be our own best friend, because that's the key to living your best life. Go subscribe and follow this. Give us 5-star reviews for my lovely Abigail's information. She deserves 5 stars. Let's grow this community. Tell your friends if anyone out there has a wonderful story and help like Abigail did for us. Please reach out, and you're welcome to be a guest on our podcast. And I just thank you. And now you get to go out there, and this is actually the end of the day for Abigail. She's going to be going to sleep soon, which is interesting.
Unlikely, unlikely.
Well, maybe
But
not soon.
it is nighttime. You can see at the window, it is nighttime. But still have to finish helping my daughter pack for camp tomorrow.
That's
Going to
right.
sleepaway camp.
Wow.
So
So our days are starting, and yours is ending. So it's so
yeah, so you have a
technology.
great day.
Technology's great that way, right? I can be saying
Yeah,
good
amazing.
morning, you can be saying good evening, and yet we can be right here having a conversation on different ends of the world. So, thank you. Stay in touch with me, Abigail, and
Thank you so much. I
it's
really
been
appreciate you and what you do. And it was a wonderful conversation.
absolutely a pleasure meeting you. Thank you.